It is really my pleasure to introduce His Royal Highness Prince Faisal bin Turki bin Abdul Aziz Al Saud, who is the advisor of the Ministry of Petroleum and Minerals, our keynote speaker for today, and he has been the champion not only as a regulator for the gas and industries, but also he was really a supporter of the petrochemical industries and the champion behind the cluster program and downstream industries in the kingdom. So, Your Highness, if you come here to deliver your speech.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate this opportunity to join you today in Dubai City to make the opening address to the 6th Annual Gulf Petrochemical and Chemical Association Conference. We'd like to thank Engineer Muhammad Al-Madi, the Association Chairman, and his colleagues on the GPCA board, as well as the Secretary General Abdul Wahab Al-Saadoun and the GPCA team for initiating and organizing this valuable event. Today, I would like to share with you some views which are very pertinent to the theme of this year's conference: moving downstream, creating added value and sustainable growth. I will focus on three main topics. First, share a brief historical perspective on the development of the Saudi hydrocarbon-based industry and the Saudi government policies with respect to the exploitation and utilization of these resources. Second, I will review the remarkable progress of the petrochemical industry. And finally, I will outline some of the ways in which the Gulf, and specifically Saudi companies and companies operating in Saudi Arabia, can continue to grow and prosper in a highly competitive environment and at the same time create wealth for their nations. To begin, let me take you back in time when the kingdom had no natural resources to speak of. At that time, King Abdulaziz invited geologists to explore for oil to help in building the modern Saudi Arabia. Oil was discovered in 1938, and in the seventh decade since that discovery, Saudi Arabia has a capable, national, and sophisticated modern oil industry. The kingdom has achieved this through prudent management of its resources and a sustained high level of investments in facilities and people, and as a result, Saudi Arabia has become known as the reliable supplier of energy to the world. The 1970s saw the start of the second wave of Saudi industrial development. The crest of that wave was the foresight and effort to monetize the associated gas that was then flared, and subsequently the development of the non-associated gas. This development of gas was the driver behind our launch into the basic industries and most prominently petrochemicals. To turn the Saudi petrochemical vision into reality, the government embarked on three simultaneous and ambitious initiatives. First was the development of the master gas system to process and deliver the required feedstock and fuel. Second was to develop and deliver the other necessary infrastructure, principally through the Royal Commission for Jubail and Yanbu. Third was to establish plants, operations, and commercial capability. To achieve that, the government created SABIC, the nucleus of Saudi petrochemical industry, which formed the initial joint ventures and is in its own right a global leader in the industry today. The results of these investments were to complement the kingdom's position as the world's reliable energy supplier, to also become the world's reliable supplier of commodity petrochemicals and polymers. The kingdom's utilization of these hydrocarbon resources allowed us to create this first wave of industrializations. And those resources will continue, inshallah, as a source of wealth for the kingdom for generations to come. Looking at the future, the kingdom wants to create further prosperity through reaping the investment it is making to advance the knowledge and skill of its society to create economic growth and job opportunities. The custodian of the two holy mosques encourages us to meet the challenge of creating prosperity by unleashing on innovation, knowledge, and skill of the Saudi people, rather than relying only on the inherited resources under our land and sea. To be able to do that, Saudi government policy on resource exploitation and utilization must have a 360-degree perspective to ensure that the kingdom is making the most valuable use of these resources. The Ministry of Petroleum and Minerals is entrusted with stewardship over the kingdom hydrocarbon and mineral resources. And its prime objective is to maximize the value of these resources. It is important to note that central to that responsibility is ensuring that the kingdom maximizes the long-term return from exporting its hydrocarbon products, and that the kingdom also have the energy to generate basic utilities to satisfy the Saudi quality of life requirement and to enable growth of the national economy. Essentially, the principal policy of resource utilization is adding value at every step in the value chain. As demonstration of the implementation of that policy, the kingdom has undertaken aggressive programs of exploration to move gas resources into reserves, utilizing and developing the most advanced technology. This will enable the kingdom, inshallah, to grow gas production capacity to about 15 billion standard cubic feet per day by 2016, from 7.7 billion standard cubic feet per day in 2002. Also, the kingdom has created the largest refining network in the Middle East that is expected to reach 3.5 million barrels per day of capacity by 2016. In undertaking all of these developments, the government encouraged the Saudization of jobs and the localization of industries and services needed for the oil and gas and basic industries. This will help retain and increase the benefit of these activities to the local economy, and this effort will continue in the future. Looking at the Saudi petrochemical industry today, I am pleased to say that it is living in a golden era. We are witnessing the largest growth in its history, with the total production of petrochemicals, chemicals, and polymers expected to be over 100 million tons by 2016, a 250% growth from 2006 levels. Our annual production of ethylene and propylene is expected to grow by over 230% and 300% respectively from the levels of 2006. The associated cumulative investments from all of these petrochemical projects are expected to be over $150 billion by 2016. The ministry, working with the industry, has focused on expanding the kingdom portfolio and moving up the value chain to include 120 new petrochemical and chemical products that will enable our further downstream conversion industry, supporting Saudi Arabia's drive toward economic diversification. In addition to the existing products, example of the new products that will be available for Saudi industries are synthetic rubbers and carbon black to support tire and construction material industries, and polycarbonates, ABS, polyurethanes, and nylon to support the automotive industry, and many more. The next three slides show these products. Very fast-moving slides. I wish that some of our companies move as fast as these slides. But I will do it again so that you see it. I hope they are showing up. Okay, good. Feeding and fueling the growth and production of these petrochemical products was made possible by the feedstock and fuel commitments made to grow the industry. These represent an unparalleled commitment of ethane, sales gas, NGLs, oil-based feedstock, and power, enabling a successful petrochemical industry. And by 2016, the total feedstock, fuel, and power committed will be equivalent to 8.7 billion standard cubic feet per day of sales gas, or equivalent to 1.6 million barrels a day of oil equivalent. However, and this is why the theme of this conference is important, most of these petrochemicals, and specifically over 85% of the polymers made by the Saudi industry, are exported and then shipped back to the region and other world consumers in the form of finished goods, with the associated jobs being created elsewhere. In some categories of the petrochemicals, the exports are over 90%. This is a substantial lost opportunity for Saudi Arabia to meet the growing demands of markets in the region while creating jobs within the convergent industries in Saudi Arabia. This lost opportunity for job creation does not make sense at a time when we have a fast-growing and well-educated population looking for work. The government has recognized this opportunity, and we believe that the kingdom and investors can capitalize on turning the basic materials, the advantaged central location of Saudi Arabia, the developed infrastructure, and the supply of skilled youth into business opportunities that diversify the economy and creates jobs and prosperity for the Saudi people. One of the initiatives by the government to help achieve this is the establishment of the National Industrial Cluster Development Program as a driver of the efforts to encourage completing the value-added potential of the kingdom's resources, moving from basic industries to convergent industries. The cluster concept is to add value and create jobs for Saudis and business opportunities that cover the basic materials produced by the petrochemical, metals, and mineral industries. These businesses will manufacture components and parts and produce finished products to meet the demand in the region and export markets. The cluster program is targeting industries selected after extensive analysis to find the sectors that can create high numbers of well-paid jobs, to be attractive for Saudis, have a growing market demand in the region, can be exported to other markets, and can make use of the basic materials produced in the kingdom. This analysis led to 5 industries, and these are mineral and metal processing, automotive value chain, plastic and packaging, home appliances, and solar energy products. To enable these new or undeveloped industries in the kingdom, the cluster program is working with other government agencies on several initiatives, including creating incentives that cater specifically to these industries, establishing a workforce intermediary company to recruit the Saudi talent and develop their knowledge and skills to be ready to work in these industries, and provide them with the development for career growth, establishing a public-private industrial investment company to invest in industrial projects that are challenging to the private sector to undertake on their own. In addition to the cluster initiative, the government is enabling the expansion of the metal industries to grow the convergent industries. One example is a major steel project being developed by HRH Steel Company at King Abdullah Economic City that will produce high-value products for the automotive, appliance, and construction industries. Another is the world's largest integrated development, which is now under construction from mine to process metal. It is being built at Ras Al Khair by the Ma'aden Al Kowa joint venture that will produce high-value products for the automotive, packaging, and construction industries. Mashi'atullah. Many other opportunities exist in addition to the industrial clusters that companies here today and elsewhere can take advantage of, such as in the silicon and phosphorus value chains. Coming back to the theme of the conference, moving downstream, creating added value and sustainable growth. The question is, how can petrochemical and chemical companies drive the development of the downstream conversion industries in Saudi Arabia while at the same time growing their business? So far, to enable the petrochemical expansion, Saudi Arabia has invested billions of dollars in the process of delivering feedstock and fuel, building the industrial infrastructure and power, and providing significant levels of loan, all of which have enabled the stellar growth of the industry. Saudi Arabia is willing and able to continue with those type of investments and is endowed with the necessary resources, but as we move forward, the governments need to be clear on what the kingdom expects in return. The government wants a diversified economy and a sustainable growth to create a substantial number of quality jobs for its people. The companies benefiting from these resources must be explicit in how they are helping the kingdom achieve that. It is clear that companies need to build new capabilities, be innovative, develop technologies, and develop their local markets. They cannot purely rely on competitive feedstock and energy as their only source of growth because competition is high for those resources. Therefore, companies looking for energy and feedstock can compete for these resources, but they have to recognize that the government analyzes the projects from a 360 degrees perspective to ensure that the projects and the industry can generate significant jobs and growth for the nation. Here, I would like to share two approaches with you that I think are going to reward the winning companies that are able to embrace them successfully. The first approach is for companies to expand while remaining close to their core petrochemical business, and this can happen through two routes. The first route is to expand in the value chain in the Saudi economy by meeting the requirement of the domestic conversion industry and expanding the use of their products in the local market. This way, they create the imperative for further expansion of their petrochemical production to serve a growing domestic market. This requires companies to be determined to enable the local converters to expand in the use of their products. So far, industry participants have not been as successful in developing conversion industries as the government would have liked them to be. So clearly, for this route to work in the future, the petrochemical companies would have to adopt more effective tools for the job. In the second route, staying close to the base petrochemical business model, I challenge companies in this more traditional model to make the case for how they would be able to raise the underlying value of the feedstock and fuel utilized by their projects. As an example, the ministry is working with SABIC on evaluating its proposal to use an integrated technology to move from market price crude oil through to petrochemicals without the conventional oil refinery in between the two. This route is successful. I could see how this would increase the underlying value of the crude, while at the same time giving SABIC volumes of feedstock to further grow their petrochemical production and supply the local market with petrochemical intermediaries. SABIC is to be applauded for taking such an innovative and challenging program into their portfolio. The second approach is for companies to show foresight and entrepreneurialism by opening new doors for growth. They can do that using their financial resources, putting their talented management teams to work, and their products to use. All this in combination with the encouragement of government to diversify the economy into new industries and investing in these opportunities. You may ask, why is the kingdom expecting Saudi-based petrochemical companies to play such an important role in economic development? In response, I would say that notwithstanding the access to competitive inputs that made them prosper, these companies, along with their cousins in the oil and gas, are the most advanced companies in the Gulf. Over the years, these companies have developed their asset base, attracted the best talent, and amassed strong financial resources and access to capital. The petrochemical companies have achieved so much that they are seen as the natural springboard to use their strength to create value by expanding and growing into related industries, thus creating a better future for them and their stakeholders. This is not a novel idea. It has been done before and continues to be implemented by entrepreneurial enterprises all over the world. There are many examples of companies that have grown by creating a great vision of what might be possible over the long term. Looking at some of these companies, one cannot help but admire the level of innovation and success, penetrating global markets and at the same time benefiting their home nations. I would like to briefly mention the history of two companies, one from the East and one from the West, which illustrates the type of resourceful and creative business thinking that we need in Saudi petrochemical industries as we move forward. The example from the East is that of LG of Korea. To millions of consumers around the world, LG is known as a consumer electronic company. However, the company started life in 1947 as Lucky Chemical Industry. They went into electronics in 1958. LG have remained in chemicals, diversifying into life science and other areas. But in the meantime, they have become the world's largest TV manufacturer and one of the largest mobile phone producers. Last year, the LG chemical revenue were still very significant, $17 billion, while the LG electronic revenue are just under $50 billion. The example from the West is Nokia from Finland. Nokia started its existence as a pulp mill paper producer, capitalizing on the forests of Finland over 100 years ago, followed by moving into rubber products, and then, at the dawn of the modern communication age, added a cable business and later computing, telecommunication, and as we all know, mobile phones. We have some of our own success stories of such entrepreneurial enterprises, with Tasni' being a good example. In fact, Tasni' began in the downstream diversified industries and later added petrochemicals. However, Tasni' are also active in organic chemicals, metals, and downstream diversified industries. Many of these businesses might be seen as non-core to the archetypal modern petrochemical company, but they are in fact integrated in one way or the other, and overall, this is the type of activity that we prize in Saudi Arabia. These diversified businesses have a favorable ratio of jobs per dollar invested and drive the diversity that then leads to other new industries in a way that, for example, an ethylene glycol plant does not. These examples demonstrate that the lines between industries are imaginary, or at least self-imposed. Companies can successfully grow in industries related or unrelated to their core business by going further downstream and growing their technological and innovative power. These approaches require the ability to think outside the box, and although that is challenging, it will be critical for the future growth of companies that expect to be successful in Saudi Arabia. Many of the firms looking to enjoy Saudi Arabia hydrocarbon resources could, if they really had the burning desire to succeed, become significant players in more diversified industries. It is this type of industrial entrepreneurship spirit that Saudi Arabia wants to recognize. In closing, I would like to summarize my message. Creating value downstream is beneficial for all stakeholders in Saudi Arabia. It provides petrochemical companies with opportunities to expand their markets and broaden their business portfolio, and at the same time allows the economy to diversify and grow and provide job opportunities. We in the Saudi oil industry will continue to develop and make available the kingdom's resources to companies that clearly demonstrate that they are serious about enabling the growth of the downstream industries. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts with you. The theme of the conference, Moving Downstream, Creating Added Value and Sustainable Growth, represents the defining challenge of the for the petrochemical and chemical companies in the Gulf. I hope that the discussions at GPCA conference will move you closer to that valuable and sustainable future. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.